Okay, today we're going to be making beef stroganoff. Starting with our ingredients. This recipe is going to differ a bit from the one that we had with Grandma. Some slight improvements. We need a medium-sized onion, 2 pounds of ground beef, preferably 80-20. This is 90-10 for health. Flour, 2 packages of egg noodles. Any brand will work. Organic, better than bouillon, beef paste, sour cream, bay leaves, garlic powder. You can optionally use real garlic too. Pacific Foods beef broth. This is very important. Only buy the Pacific Foods ones, not the other ones. Heinz ketchup. It needs to be Heinz. Can't be any weird ketchups. The original Lee and Perrin's Worcester sauce. Cannot be knockoff Worcester sauce. Heavy cream. This can be any type of heavy cream. And then butter. So today we are using incredibly fancy French butter. But normally I would recommend Kerrygold, which is an Irish butter, like our heritage. But historically, Grandma and Mom used to make it with Land O'Lakes. And we need a couple cooking utensils to make use of these ingredients. So today we'll be using a cutting board for all of our vegetables, optionally garlic, etc. A sharp knife, a 2-cup beaker with the special nozzle here. That's to help when creating the roux. We have a tablespoon, which we'll use for our ketchup and our Worcester sauce. And then we have 2 different bowls. Any bowl will do, but these are going to hold our veggies. And then finally, the key to this is to use 1 pot for the whole thing so that the flavor is maintained. And it needs to be a large pot, so we'll be doing 2 pounds of beef in here. So we'll start by washing our hands, the most important part. Pre-washed my hands prior to this, so I don't need to use soap. But normally I would. All right, so we will start with our onion. We'll take this, peel a little bit off. To do this, I'm going to cut off the butts first. 1 butt there, 1 butt here. And I'm going to peel this off. Okay. After the onion is peeled, we're going to take it, cut it in half here. Put the 2 halves down. Like this. We'll put this. All right, so I've already cut the first half of the onion, but now that it's in half, what I'm going to do is take my knife, and I'm going to have a little bit here on the end. I'm going to go in, and I'm going to cut like this, as fine as possible, but leave a little bit on the end, something like this. Tell me when. And so now I am going to cut here and just hold it together, but dice it very fine. We want this to be fine for our stroganoff. I want it to be garlic sized so that it caramelizes properly. We're actually going to start cooking the onions. And so the key here is to cook them slowly and not to burn them. So if you look inside of our stove here, we have 3 tablespoons of salted butter. And we're going to take it and we're going to put it between medium and low, more towards the low side. So you can see our butter in there. And then I'm going to just add the onions in. Get them in there. And you'll see that the onions are very, very fine. And we want that to be as consistent as possible so that they cook consistently. Otherwise, when we stir the onions, we're making sure to scrape the walls so none stick, because they will get burnt. the center, waiting for this butter to melt, and we're gonna just keep stirring it for several minutes. Actually, this is quite laborious, but we have rewarded with one of the best smells in the world. Our onions are almost done. Actually, almost at 10 minutes or so stirring. They are getting to be quite golden. Our onions are now translucent, almost like a paste. They are done. So I've turned off my heat, and I'm going to move them. And there's the finished product right there. After the labor of love that was the onion. We will be setting these aside after 12 minutes of cooking on low. So now we're grabbing our meat. Here I have 2 pounds of 90-10, which I do not recommend. I recommend the 80-20, but 90-10 works as well. So I'm going to take this. We don't need any butter with the meat because there's already fat in the meat. So I'm going to drop this right in here, and doing that in the same exact pan. And the reason we're doing that is so that it gets all that flavor. And we will turn this heat on again, this time on medium. As we cook our meat here, we want to brown it. And so have garlic powder here. And if we're going to use regular garlic, we might use 4 or 5 cloves. But with garlic powder, we're going to use a considerable more amount because it's weaker. The garlic powder, see how much we really add, is quite a lot. So a ton of garlic powder there. You should keep adding it until you can smell the garlic. So still not smelling it, I'm going to add even more. So it's just been a couple minutes now, and we are looking good. There's a tiny bit of pink in it, but for the most part, it is cooked up. And so we're actually going to remove this and turn off the heat, and then... So we've got the beef here on the side, and I've started to take out the things for the roux. And there's a couple key ingredients. One, and most importantly, is our butter. If you use a Kerrygold or Land O'Lakes, you can choose 4 or 5 tablespoons. 5 tablespoons you should use. Beyond that, the flour for making the roux, our Pacific beef broth. So we're gonna take this and shake it, and then I'm gonna fill this up with the broth. And this is not like a technical amount if yours doesn't have the measurements. What we're trying to do here is heat up the broth, and then we're gonna figure out the consistency as we add it. So we may have to add more later, we may not, but it's gonna be based on consistency, less on prescriptive measurements. And then finally, I'm using this better than bouillon, and so taking a pretty good sized tablespoon scoop of that, I'm grabbing my beef broth, putting it in here for roughly 45 seconds. The goal is to get it to be warm, not hot. And then as soon as that's done, I'll take the bouillon and stir that in. Broth is done. Grabbing that. Warm but not hot. Now I'll take this tablespoon of bouillon and start to stir this in so it dissolves. So I have my butter melting here. I've turned the thing on low, and now I'm going to be adding 3 tablespoons of flour to get the roux started. So there's our first scoop of flour, 2nd tablespoon of flour, 3rd tablespoon of flour. And for each tablespoon, I'm measuring it in the measuring cup, making sure it's exactly that tablespoon, flattening off the top. And now the flour is cooking with the butter, and it needs to be constantly tended to as we work towards making the consistency of something like a cake pop. So at this point, I've actually had to add a little bit more flour, but you can see how doughy it is. It's really doughy, thick. And that's when we're gonna start adding this beef broth in here, little by little, and whisking rapidly, maintaining that doughy consistency. We don't want to lose that. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the start of the roux. Just going to keep adding as it goes, but making sure to keep the consistency, have no flour bubbles. Let's see how liquid that is. And making sure it's all uniform. Turning up the heat just a little bit to try and get it thicker. And so basically this is more of an art than a science, but adding in more and more beef broth and adding a little bit of heat until it reaches the color that you want to see for your stroganoff gravy. The roux is about done. It's starting to stick to the sides just a little bit. It's got a nice consistency, almost like a carrot soup or something, maybe a little bit lighter than that. You can decide how saucy you want it, but for our stroganoff, I like to do it full but still liquid. So I'm grabbing my meat over here, and I'm going to start to add it into the roux. So taking this. This is my meat and onion mixture that's been sitting. Still got a little bit of fat in it, as you can see. And I'm just gonna dump that in there all the way. And use that spatula to get anything that's left out as quickly as possible. And then start to stir this up. And so if you look in here, you can see that our roux and our meat and our onions are starting to come together. So we're going to be saucing. Put some of the Worcester sauce, 2 tablespoons of this. Just one, so that one will be a little bit more liberal with. Add it in there. Make sure to stir that up. We're also going to add our ketchup at this point. There's 1. 2. Keep on stirring this. We're going to add a dash of the heavy cream. Sous chef here. A little bit. Now we're going to see some of that color starting to come in that we're used to. There's stroganoff. Small one and a big one. So I'm putting 2 of those in, mixing them up. And I'm gonna keep mixing this. Everything's all stirred in, and so we're gonna let it sit. Bay leaves, the longer the better. Turn this down to low heat as it rests. In the meantime, get these noodles ready. Final steps are to butter the noodles and put the sour cream on top. All done.